we we had been living with the director of the settlement house. She was a social worker, a very nice single lady who had just bought a house out in Port Credit, which was just outside of Toronto. And she said to me, you know, why don't you, you know, come and live with me and pay me rent to help me pay my mortgage? And that would be better for you because you can travel in with me, you know, drive in with me. Whereas I was in the north end of Toronto, and I had to take a streetcar it took a long time to get to work, and so I had been living in that, I think, you know, for about 2 years. And it was a very nice arrangement. She was a very lovely lady. It was a great place for the boys. The school there was good. But I just felt that they were growing up in such a female environment, you know, that they were getting older now, getting towards their teens, that I really felt that it was really in their best interest to make a change. And the Canadian government was advertising for teachers for the Northwest Territories, and they were particularly interested in my application because I had the social work background too, and they felt that was very valuable in terms of working with the Eskimo children and families. So they were, they were kind of really encouraged me. I went up to Ottawa for an interview, and they really encouraged me to take the position. And of course, you know, my friends thought I was crazy taking the boys and going up to the but we did. We went up there, and there were adjustments. The Canadian government, I felt, had an excellent philosophy. They wanted people who would really be understanding of the cultural changes that were taking place for the Eskimos, and who would not build in, you know, prejudice barriers, you know, for them. And it was, you know, I can remember just experiences flying up in this old plane. There were no seats. We sat on the cargo, and no seat belts or anything. We just stretched out on the cargo bus. And of course the boys, you know, they loved it. It was a, you know, great experience for them. And I remember such things as my first day of school. I had just been there a couple of days, and there was a wonderful, she was a supervising teacher who had set up the school there, and who kind of greeted me and helped me to get settled in. She was a wonderful teacher and just a wonderful person. I look back on her with, you know, very, very kind thoughts, because it could have been quite different without the kind of help that she gave me. But I do remember crazy things, such as we had a small, you know, house like that the Canadian government had built for the Eskimos, and we had one just the same. It had no running water and no running toilets. We used what was known as the honey bucket, and that was once a day removed by one of the Eskimos that had that responsibility, and and put back in our house. I do remember I was, you know, supposed to be at the schoolhouse at a certain time, and I very hurriedly dumped the water from the dishes I had been washing into the sink. And there was a bucket under the sink. That's how it worked when you took the bucket out and emptied it. But I was so used to running water that I just forgot that. So as I'm halfway through the morning at the school, I suddenly remembered that I had dumped this water, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have such a mess when I get back. It's going to be water all over the floor. I didn't have to worry. There was ice all over the floor. These kinds of things. That the ice formed in the corners of the room, but actually it was good because I came to realize that was a barrier, a heat barrier, and it kept the heat in the house. So it sounds kind of strange, but it really did. And we our supplies came up once a year by boat, and result was you had boxes and boxes in this small place. But what we did was we kind of stacked the boxes of the food supplies. We stacked the cartons so they made seats, so they made chairs, and until you kind of through the year you ate away your chairs as the supplies went down. So it was an interesting experience. That I lived and worked in in the village of Iqaluit, as it was called. I think it was about 3 miles from the village. There was an Air Force base, and an American Air Force base. There was a cooperative arrangement between the Canadian government and the U.S. government, and we were always invited. There were probably by this time I think the third female up there. There were 2 nurses when I got there, but then Maxine, who introduced me, but as soon as I was settled in, she left. The nurses and I was the single, the unattached one. So we were always invited over to the officers' lounge there, and one Sunday afternoon, with one of the newer women who came up as an office person, we walked over to took a walk over to the officers' club, and Webb had just come in. I'd never seen him before, and I noticed him right away, and he evidently noticed me, as we found out later. And I think that although we didn't, we just introduced ourselves, but we didn't have any conversation at that time. But then a few days later, or a week later, there was a party there, and that that I attended, and that's when we began to talk and got to know each other, and fell very much in love.